I never thought I'd see Jessica again after high school. Our lives had drifted apart after graduation, and I'd resigned myself to the fact that our paths wouldn't cross again. That is until that fateful day in New Orleans, where I was grabbing groceries after a long stint offshore in Brunei. The oil rigs were grueling, and the thought of home kept me going. As I paid for my items and turned to leave, a voice called my name. "James, is that you?" I turned around, and there she was, Jessica, with her aunt. Her smile was as radiant as ever, and before I knew it, she was in my arms, hugging me fiercely. We were grinning like fools, reminiscing about old times. "Jessica, I can't believe it's you," I exclaimed, holding her at arm's length to get a good look at her. "You haven't changed a bit." "And you, James," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Still the same old charmer." We exchanged numbers and agreed to meet later that evening at a resort. As I drove back home, my mind was racing. Memories of our high school days flooded back. I remembered the first time we met at a basketball game, how we cheered our team to victory, and how our friendship blossomed into something more. That evening, I found myself nervously pacing the room, waiting for the time to leave. When I finally arrived at the resort, Jessica was already there, sitting at a table by the pool, the soft glow of the resort lights casting a warm glow around her. "Hey," I said, walking up to her. "You look amazing." "Thanks, James," she replied, standing up to hug me. "It's so good to see you." We sat down and ordered drinks. The conversation flowed easily, just like old times. "So, what have you been up to all these years?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Well," Jessica began, "I stayed here in New Orleans, went to college, and now I'm working as a graphic designer. It's been a crazy ride, but I love it. What about you?" "I've been working offshore, on oil rigs. It's tough work, but it pays well," I explained. "I just got back from Brunei." "Wow, that sounds intense," she said, her eyes wide with admiration. "How do you manage being away for so long?" "It's hard," I admitted, "but thinking about home, about moments like this, keeps me going." Jessica smiled, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, lost in the connection we had once shared. "Do you remember that time we skipped school and went to the lake?" she asked, breaking the silence. "How could I forget?" I laughed. "We thought we were so rebellious. And we got caught by Mr. Thompson," she added, giggling. "He was so mad." We spent hours talking, reminiscing about our high school days, and sharing stories about our lives since then. It felt like no time had passed at all, and yet so much had changed. As the night drew to a close, we found ourselves walking along the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. "James, I'm really glad we ran into each other today," Jessica said, stopping to face me. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too, Jess," I replied, taking her hand. "Maybe this is fate's way of giving us a second chance." "Maybe it is," she said softly, her eyes locking onto mine. We stood there for a moment, the world around us fading away. In that instant, I knew that whatever had happened in the past, we had a chance to start anew, and I wasn't going to let that chance slip away. As we walked back to the resort, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something special, something that was meant to be. Jessica and I got married within the year, and 9 months later, our son Smith was born. He was a bundle of energy, and Jessica showered him with love. My work took me away from home often, but I always looked forward to returning to my family. Smith's laughter and innocent eyes were my refuge from the harsh realities of the oil rigs. From the moment Smith was born, he brought a new light into our lives. His cries filled our home with a melody we quickly grew to love. Jessica was a natural mother, always by his side, nurturing and caring for him with a tenderness that filled my heart with pride. Despite the long hours and tough conditions offshore, thoughts of Jessica and Smith kept me going. "James, look at him," Jessica would often say, her eyes shining with joy as Smith giggled and reached out for her. "He's growing so fast." "I know," I'd reply, my heart swelling with happiness. "I can't wait to spend more time with you both." However, when Smith was around 6 months old, we noticed something troubling. He wasn't responding to his name or making the usual baby sounds. At first, we brushed it off as a phase. But as time went on, our concerns grew. "James, do you think there's something wrong?" Jessica asked one evening, her voice filled with worry. "I don't know, Jess," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But we should get him checked out, just to be sure." We made an appointment with a pediatrician, who advised us to observe Smith closely and be patient. By the time Smith turned 1, nothing had changed. He still had trouble making eye contact and didn't respond to his name. It was heartbreaking to see our little boy struggling. We decided to seek a more detailed diagnosis. The day we received the news was one of the hardest days of our lives. The doctor confirmed that Smith had autism spectrum disorder. Jessica broke down in tears. "What are we going to do, James?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We'll do whatever it takes to help him," I said firmly, holding her close. "We'll get through this together." The doctor gave us tips to help Smith, like using his name often, speaking slowly and clearly, and using simple gestures. We followed the advice diligently. Slowly but surely, we started seeing improvements. Smith began using gestures and a few words to communicate. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to us. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat with Smith on the living room floor, playing with his toys. Jessica joined us, her smile warm and encouraging. "Look, Smith," I said, holding up a toy car. "Can you say car?" Smith looked at the car, then at me. "See car," he stuttered, a small smile forming on his lips. "That's right," Jessica exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Good job, sweetie." Smith's eyes lit up, and he clapped along, his laughter filling the room. Moments like these made all the struggles worth it. As the months went by, Smith continued to make progress. By age 2, he could perform routine tasks with less support. He loved drawing and would often show me his pictures when I returned from work. Jessica and I made sure to encourage his passion, even though it sometimes left her feeling overwhelmed. "He's doing so well, James," Jessica said one night as we watched Smith draw. "I'm so proud of him." "Me too," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "He's our little miracle." Despite the challenges, we never gave up. We learned to communicate with Smith in ways that worked for him, and we celebrated every small step forward. Our journey was far from over, but we faced it together, determined to give Smith the best life possible. Through it all, Jessica's love for Smith never wavered, and neither did mine. Our family might not have been perfect, but it was ours, and we cherished every moment we had together. One day, I came home after a long shift on the rigs, tired but happy to be with my family. As soon as I walked through the door, Smith ran up to me, his face glowing with excitement. He held up a beautifully colored drawing of a cup and bowl. "Daddy, look what I drew," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with pride. I knelt down to his level, taking the drawing from his hands. "Wow, Smith, this is amazing. Did Mommy help you with this?" Smith shook his head, a curious look on his face. "No, Uncle helped me." My heart skipped a beat. "Uncle? Which uncle, Putty?" Smith pointed towards the kitchen, where Jessica was busy preparing dinner. "Uncle from Mommy's room." I walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, Jess," Smith showed me a great drawing. He said an uncle helped him. "Who's this uncle he's talking about?" Jessica froze for a moment, then turned to me with a forced smile. "Oh, just a friend who dropped by to say hi. Nothing to worry about." Her evasiveness only made me more suspicious. While at work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started calling Jessica frequently, pretending it was just to check on them, but I was really fishing for clues. "Hey Jess, how are things going? How's Smith?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual. "Everything's fine, James," she'd reply, her voice always a bit too cheerful. "Smith's just drawing again. You know how much he loves it." But Smith's innocent comments kept gnawing at me. He'd mention this uncle more often, describing how his mom would scream loudly whenever this man visited. "Daddy, Mommy gets loud when Uncle is here," Smith said one night as we were drawing together. "Loud how, buddy?" I asked, trying to hide the tension in my voice. He covered his ears and made a screaming sound. My blood ran cold. I decided to set a trap. I told Jessica I had to leave for work the next morning due to an emergency. Seeing the excitement on her face confirmed my suspicions. The next day, I pretended to leave, but returned home secretly, parking a few blocks away and walking back to the house. I quietly let myself in, the house eerily silent except for the sound of the TV in the living room. Smith was sitting on the floor, watching cartoons. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "Where's Mommy?" Smith pointed to the bedroom. "With Uncle." My heart pounded as I made my way down the hallway, my steps careful and silent. I noticed a pair of men's shoes by the bedroom door, shoes that definitely weren't mine. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. There they were, Jessica and a man, both naked, caught in the act. Jessica collapsed on the floor, crying, while the man scrambled to cover himself, his face pale with fear. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. The man stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Turning to Jessica, I felt tears of betrayal welling up in my eyes. "How could you do this to me, Jess?" "I never meant to hurt you, James," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "He's my former boyfriend. We dated before you came along. When you asked me to marry you, we broke up, but he came back after we got married. I resisted him for over a year, but I finally gave in." Fury burned through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and took several photos and videos of them. "You'll regret this," I said coldly, my hands trembling. The man begged for mercy, offering money to delete the photos and video. I laughed bitterly. "You should have known better." They both knelt, begging, but I was unmoved. "Get out," I ordered the man. "You'll hear from me soon." He fled, leaving Jessica sobbing on the floor. I walked out of the room, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. I found Smith still in the living room, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. I picked him up, holding him close. "Don't worry, buddy," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We'll be okay." That night, I made arrangements for Smith to stay with my sister, Juliet. I explained everything to her, and she gladly took him in. I stayed with a colleague for a few days, unable to face returning home just yet. The pain of Jessica's betrayal was too fresh, too raw. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd do everything in my power to protect my son and move forward, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. I crept towards the bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step echoing louder in my ears. I noticed a pair of men's shoes that weren't mine, confirming my worst fears. Taking a deep breath, I burst through the door. There they were, Jessica and another man, both naked. The man scrambled to cover himself, eyes wide with fear, while Jessica collapsed on the floor, crying. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Harry," he stammered, barely audible. "Harry," I said, my eyes narrowing. "What the hell are you doing in my house, Harry?" He mumbled something incoherent, avoiding my gaze. Turning to Jessica, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "How could you do this to me, Jess?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you?" "I never meant to hurt you, James," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "He's my former boyfriend. We dated before you came along. When you asked me to marry you, we broke up, but he came back after we got married. I resisted him for over a year, but I finally gave in." Over a year. I repeated, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. All this time, you've been lying to me. Jessica looked up, her face streaked with tears. I'm so sorry, James. I never wanted this to happen. I was weak. I was confused. Fury consumed me. I pulled out my phone, taking several photos and making a video of them. Harry tried to cover his face, pleading, "Please, don't do this. I'll do anything. Just delete those photos." I laughed bitterly. You should have thought about that before you decided to sneak into my house and sleep with my wife. Jessica reached out, grabbing my leg. James, please, don't do this. Think of Smith. Think of Smith. I snapped, shaking her off. How dare you bring him into this? You didn't think of him when you were doing this, did you? Harry knelt beside Jessica, his hands trembling. Please, man. I'm sorry. I'll pay you. Just delete everything. You think you can buy your way out of this? I shouted, my anger boiling over. Get out. Both of you. Harry stood up, grabbing his clothes and rushing out of the room. Jessica stayed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. James, please, don't leave me. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, she begged, her voice desperate. I looked at her, the woman I had loved, the mother of my child, and felt a wave of sorrow and rage. You've broken something that can't be fixed, Jess, I said quietly. I trusted you, and you betrayed me. I walked out of the room, leaving Jessica in a heap of tears. In the living room, I found Smith playing with his toys, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. I picked him up, holding him close, feeling his small arms wrap around my neck. Daddy, what's wrong? He asked, sensing my distress. Nothing, buddy, I whispered, choking back tears. We're going to be okay. I promise. That night, I made arrangements for Smith to stay with my sister, Juliet. When I arrived at her house, I could barely hold back my emotions. Juliet took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. James, what happened? She asked, taking Smith from my arms. It's Jess, I said, my voice breaking. She's been cheating on me. Juliet's eyes widened in shock. Oh, James, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, Jules. I feel like my world is falling apart. We'll get through this, she said firmly. You and Smith will always have a place here. We're family. I stayed with a colleague for a few days, unable to face returning home. The pain of Jessica's betrayal was too fresh, too raw. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd do everything in my power to protect my son and move forward, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. As Harry scrambled out of my house, I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing with what to do next. I knew I couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. I needed to make sure that Jessica and Harry felt the full weight of their actions. I quickly got dressed and grabbed my keys. Driving through the city, I found a local printing press that was open late. The man behind the counter gave me a curious look as I handed him my phone with the photos and videos. I need these printed in large sizes. Can you do it? I asked, my voice steady but cold. He nodded, looking slightly apprehensive. Yeah, I can do that. How many copies? Enough to cover the town, I replied, my eyes hardening. And I need them quickly. While the prints were being made, I called a few friends, people I knew from around town who owed me favors. They agreed to help distribute the photos, no questions asked. Within a few hours, the photos were plastered all over the city, on walls, bus stops, and even outside Harry's fast food chain. Next, I posted the video online, ensuring it would spread rapidly. Then, I contacted a local newspaper, providing them with the photos and a detailed narrative of Jessica and Harry's betrayal. The editor was more than happy to publish the story, knowing it would sell papers. Satisfied that I had done everything I could to expose their betrayal, I drove to my sister Juliet's house. She opened the door, concern etched on her face. James, what's going on? She asked as I stepped inside. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night's events pressing down on me. Jessica's been cheating on me. I caught her with another man. Juliet's eyes widened in shock. Oh, James, I'm so sorry. I need you to take Smith for a few days. I can't have him around this mess right now. Of course, she said, reaching out to hug me. You know he's always welcome here. I stayed with a colleague for a few days, unable to face returning home. The scandal spread quickly. Jessica couldn't bear the shame and fled to Nebraska with her aunt, never returning or calling to check on Smith. Harry's life fell apart. His business collapsed as customers boycotted his fast food chain. His wife divorced him, and his children disowned him. He ended up in a rehabilitation center, a broken man. One evening, I sat with Juliet on her porch, the cool breeze calming my turbulent thoughts. Do you think I went too far? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Juliet looked at me, her expression thoughtful. James, you were hurt and angry. You did what you felt was necessary to cope with that pain. Maybe it wasn't the best way, but it's done now. The important thing is to focus on moving forward. I nodded, taking in her words. I just want Smith to be okay. I want to be the father he deserves. You will be, she said firmly. You're a good man, James. You'll get through this, and so will Smith. As I sat there, I realized that Juliet was right. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future. My focus had to be on Smith and rebuilding our lives. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with my sister's support, I felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, I went back to my house. It felt empty and cold, but I knew I had to face it. I started cleaning, removing any trace of Jessica and her betrayal. Each sweep of the broom, each scrub of the cloth felt like a step towards reclaiming my home, my life. When I finally picked up Smith from Juliet's, he hugged me tightly. Daddy, are we going home? Yeah, buddy, I said, my voice steady. We're going home. As we drove back, I looked at Smith in the rearview mirror, his innocent eyes full of trust. I knew that no matter what, I had to be strong for him. The scandal might have rocked our world, but we would rebuild it, one day at a time. And in that moment, I promised myself that I would do everything in my power to give Smith the happy, stable life he deserved. Returning home was harder than I expected. The house felt empty, haunted by memories of happier times. But I knew I had to move forward, for Smith's sake. The first step was enrolling him in a special school for autistic children, where he could get the support he needed. Miss Meyer, the autism specialist, greeted us warmly on our first visit. She had a calm, reassuring presence that immediately put me at ease. Hello, Smith, she said, kneeling to his level. I'm Miss Meyer, and I'm so happy you're here. We're going to have a lot of fun learning together. Smith looked at her, then at me, his eyes wide with curiosity. Hi, he said softly, clinging to my hand. He's a bit shy, I explained, smiling apologetically. That's okay, Miss Meyer replied. We'll take things at his pace. He's going to do great here. As the weeks went by, Smith thrived under Miss Meyer's guidance. He learned to count, read, and speak more fluently. His confidence grew with each passing day. One afternoon, he proudly showed me a drawing he had made at school. Daddy, look. I drew a lion, Smith said, holding up his colorful artwork. That's amazing, buddy, I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. You're so talented. Smith beamed with pride, and I felt a surge of happiness. Despite the challenges, he was flourishing, and I couldn't be prouder. But even with Smith's progress, there were still moments of doubt and sadness. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so wrong. I'd replay conversations with Jessica, trying to pinpoint the moment we started drifting apart. But no matter how much I analyzed, the answers never came. One evening, after tucking Smith into bed, I sat on the porch with Juliet. The night was quiet, the stars twinkling above us. Do you ever wonder what went wrong? I asked, breaking the silence. Juliet sighed. leaning back in her chair. Sometimes, James, but some things just don't have clear answers. People change, circumstances change. It's not always something you can understand. I just feel like I failed, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. You didn't fail, she said firmly. You're doing everything you can for Smith. You're building a new life for both of you. That takes strength. I nodded, taking comfort in her words. Thanks, Jules. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll always have me, she replied, squeezing my hand. And he'll always have Smith. You two are going to be just fine. With time, our new routine brought a sense of normalcy. Every morning, Smith and I had breakfast together, and every evening, we'd draw, read, or watch cartoons. On weekends, we'd visit the park or the zoo, exploring new adventures together. I made sure he felt loved and secure, no matter what. Smith continued to excel in his studies and art. Miss Meyer often praised his progress during our meetings. Smith is a remarkable child, she said one day. His creativity and intelligence are truly impressive. He's going to achieve great things. Hearing those words filled me with hope. Despite everything, Smith was thriving. And that was all that mattered. One night, as I lay in bed, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of happier times before the betrayal. There was one of Jessica and me on our wedding day, smiling and oblivious to the storm that would eventually tear us apart. I felt a lump in my throat, the familiar sting of tears threatening to fall. But then I saw a picture of Smith, his wide eyes full of wonder, his tiny hand clutching a crayon. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had a purpose. Smith needed me, and I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I threw myself into my work, both at home and on the oil rigs. The physical labor was a welcome distraction, a way to channel my frustration and anger. My colleagues noticed a change in me, but I kept my personal life private. They respected that, and I appreciated their understanding. During one of my breaks, I received a call from Juliet. Hey, James, I wanted to talk to you about something. Sure, what's up? I asked, leaning against the railing of the rig. It's about Smith. I think he needs more interaction with kids his age. He's doing great, but some play dates or maybe even a sports activity could be good for him. I considered her suggestion. You're right. He does need more social interaction. I'll look into some options when I get back. When I returned home, I signed Smith up for a little league soccer team. The first practice was a bit rough. Smith was hesitant and unsure of himself, but the coach was patient, and the other kids were welcoming. Slowly, Smith started to engage more, running after the ball and laughing with his teammates. One evening after practice, Smith ran up to me, his face flushed with excitement. Dad, did you see me? I kicked the ball really far. I saw, buddy. You were amazing out there, I said, ruffling his hair. His smile was the highlight of my day, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was light. Watching Smith find his place in the world, seeing him happy and thriving, was the best revenge against the darkness that had tried to consume us. As time went on, I realized that revenge wasn't about hurting those who had wronged me. It was about rising above the pain and building a life that was even better than before. Smith and I were doing that together, one day at a time. Each day brought new challenges and new joys. We faced them head-on, determined to create a future filled with love and hope. Smith's resilience inspired me, proving that no matter the obstacles, we could overcome them together. Our journey was far from over, but we were on the right path, and that was all that mattered. Years later, I received a letter from Jessica. My heart pounded as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. The letter was brief, apologizing for her actions and explaining that she had been in therapy, trying to understand why she had done what she did. She asked for forgiveness and hoped to reconnect with Smith. I sat with the letter for a long time, contemplating my response. The memories of betrayal still stung, but I knew that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. I needed to move forward for my sake and for Smith's. In the end, I decided to forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine and Smith's. I wrote back, telling her that I had forgiven her, but our priority was Smith's well-being. If she wanted to be a part of his life, she needed to prove that she was committed to his happiness and stability. Jessica began visiting Smith under my supervision. At first, it was awkward, filled with uncomfortable silences and tentative conversations. "Hi, Smith," Jessica said softly during her first visit, kneeling down to his level. "I've missed you so much." Smith looked at her, then at me, seeking reassurance. I nodded, encouraging him. "Hi, Mommy," he replied, his voice quiet but clear. Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him gently. "I'm so sorry for everything, sweetheart. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Over time, Smith warmed up to her. They started spending more time together, drawing and playing games. He deserved to have his mother in his life as long as she was genuinely there for him. As the years passed, we found a new balance. Jessica and I would never be the same, but we had found a way to co-parent amicably. One afternoon, Jessica and I sat on the porch, watching Smith play in the yard. His laughter filled the air, a sound that always brought me joy. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Jessica said quietly, her gaze fixed on Smith. "It's not about us," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's about him. He deserves both of his parents." Jessica nodded, a look of gratitude in her eyes. "I'm working hard to be a better person, James. For him, and for myself." "I know you are," I said, glancing at her, "and I appreciate that." Smith continued to excel, his talent in art growing with each passing year. He became known in the community for his incredible drawings, and even won several awards. One day, as I watched Smith receive an award for his artwork at a school assembly, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. "Dad, I did it," Smith exclaimed, running up to me with his award in hand. "I'm so proud of you, buddy," I said, lifting him up in a hug. "You've worked so hard, and it's paying off." Jessica stood nearby, tears of pride in her eyes. "You're amazing, Smith," she said, hugging him tightly. We had been through so much, but we had come out stronger on the other side. Our story was one of triumph, a testament to the power of love and the human spirit. We had turned our pain into strength, our sorrow into joy, and that, I realized, was the best revenge. As we walked home that day, Smith between us, holding our hands, I felt a sense of completeness. Life had a way of throwing challenges our way, but it also had a way of healing and mending what was broken. Our journey was far from over, but we were facing it together, united by love and resilience. "Dad, what's for dinner?" Smith asked, looking up at me with a smile. "How about we make your favorite, spaghetti?" I suggested, ruffling his hair. "Yes," he cheered, his face lighting up. Jessica laughed softly. "I'll help with the sauce." As we entered the house, I felt a warmth spread through me. Despite everything, we had found our way back to happiness. Our past had shaped us, but it didn't define us. Together, we would continue to build a future filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities.